If you're wondering how this treatment option can help you, here's a doctor-patient consultation on acupuncture, and Dr. Snow explains how Qi works.
Well, John, I'm glad you came in today. Before we get started, I'd like to know where you're coming from. What do you know about acupuncture and Oriental medicine?
I heard that it's very good from a friend.
Do you know how it works? You know what Qi is?
No, I don't.
Do you know what an acupuncture point is?
No, I don't.
A meridian?
No.
Okay. Before we get started, I know we've already discussed some of the sensations that you're going to feel, and sensations you're not supposed to feel. Remember, anything that's burning or stinging, if I put the needle in, that's a no-no. It's against the law. Tell me and I'll pull the needle out and reinsert it. I do want sensations though. And the sensation is usually a pulling sensation, a cramping sensation. Now, it doesn't have to be big. You're going to control how big it is. So if you don't say anything, guess what? It's going to get real big. So as soon as you say you feel it, just say, got it. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Now, Qi. What is Qi? Well, one of the oldest books that we have in Chinese medicine is called the Huangdi Jing, or the Yellow Emperor's Classic on Internal Medicine. And that was written around 220 BC. And in the Huangdi Jing, it states that each of your organs in your body, like the liver, the kidney, the lungs, they generate their own Qi. And the Qi of that organ is different than the Qi of the one before it. But each organ balances the one after it. And once these organs are balanced, then this Qi must then go to the fingers, the toes, the nose, and the brain. And it has to nourish these areas. Now, how does it get from the organ system, or the center of the body, to these areas, the fingers, the nose, the toes, and the brain? Well, we have a meridian system. Now, the meridian system is pretty formulated, and it's been around for a couple of thousands of years. But your medical doctors and your scientists will say, pshaw, they don't exist because we've cut thousands of bodies up. A lot of cadavers, and they do not exist. The meridians don't exist. But they're being a little disingenuous when they say that, because what you can do is go down to your Walmart right down the road there and buy a little ohm meter. You know what that is, don't you?
Yeah.
And you can rub it across your skin, and not only will you find meridians, those are little areas in the tissue that are less resistant than other areas, but you can actually find the acupuncture points that way. For instance, can you see gravity?
No.
Would it be very smart of me to say it doesn't exist?
No.
No, it wouldn't, because I can't see gravity, but it certainly exists, and the same with the meridian system and the acupuncture point system. Now, I just explained to you a little bit about how Oriental medical theory explains the meridians and the Qi, but these books never define the Qi. So what the heck is it? Is it something ephemeral? Is it mystical? Well, no, it's not. And I found out what Qi was actually just a few years ago, firsthand, when I got my first electroacuoscope. Now, remember, I discussed these little acupuncture points and the meridians as being little areas of lesser resistance than other areas?
Yes.
Resistant to what? Electricity. Now, have you had any kind of cell physiology? Any classes in how a cell operates?
No.
Okay, well, you're going to get one right now. Every cell, whether it's human or animal, has a cell membrane around it. And this cell membrane is a bilipid layer made of mostly cholesterol. Now, embedded in this cell membrane, like this little balloon with the contents of the cell in it, you have little ATP pumps, or active transport pumps, embedded in this cell membrane. And that's how metabolites or waste products get out of the cell and into the bloodstream or interstitial fluid, and how nutrients get into the cell. Now, when nutrients get into the cell, within the cell you have your DNA, your nucleus and Golgi bodies, and your mitochondria. Your mitochondria now is the power plant of the cell. It generates power. When protein or glucose hits the mitochondria of the cell, a little chemical reaction takes place, and this is converted into ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now, this adenosine triphosphate has 3 phosphate chains on it. Immediately, the cell does not store ATP, but it's the basic food of the cell. Immediately, that second phosphate chain is cleaved off that cell through a chemical reaction. And when that happens, a little electrical charge is spun around the cell called the cell membrane potential, and it's measured in millionths of an amp. That's chi. So basically what chi is the cumulative or aggregate cell membrane potential of the body. Now, how these ancient Chinese physicians knew this, I don't know, because they didn't have any of the meters that we have, and the science didn't exist then that we have now. But if you think about this, if you'll look at all the tissues of the body, the skin, the lungs, the mucous membranes, the kidneys, per square millimeter of tissue, what is the most densest tissue in your body? The most dense tissue in your body. What would you think that would be?
Muscle.
Yeah, that's a good guess. What about your liver? Your liver, your heart, the organ systems. Now, we've already reviewed how the Chinese looked at the organ system, but let's look at modern physics today. Now, modern physics tells us that electricity can only go from a high concentration to a low concentration, or from a high gradient to a low gradient. It cannot go against the gradient, can it? Electricity always has to flow down, basically. Okay, so if the organ systems have the most bioelectricity, the cell membrane potential, this bioelectricity must now come to the fingers, the toes, the nose, and the brain to nourish it. So how does it do that? Well, it does it through that meridian system that we discussed earlier, and you can see on these little acupuncture man here. So we know what a meridian is now, but what's an acupuncture point? Now, the classics say, and so did King Solomon in the Bible, that there's nothing new under the sun. That means, and so did the ancient Chinese, by the way, that means that we're just a microcosm of the macrocosm. Take an atom, for instance. If you look at an atom and then you look at the solar system through the Hubble microscope, don't they sort of look the same? You have electrons spinning around. And so our bodies are made up of atoms, just like the atoms in the soil. Right? Okay. Now, that being the case, take a city like Lake Charles, where we're in right now. Lake Charles gets its power from somewhere, right? Remember we talked about the mitochondria earlier being the power plant of the cell? How far away does this power plant have to be for us to get electricity here in Lake Charles to power our house or our clinic? It can be 1,000 miles away, can't it?
Yes.
Okay. Take, for instance, let's say that power plant's 1,000 miles away. As that power plant generates power for us to use here, what happens to it as it goes down a power line? What happens to the electricity?
Decreases.
It decreases due to the resistance in the power line, right? So the power company has a problem here. How do they keep the power built up so that we can use it and it's not gone by the time it gets to us? What do?
Substation.
Substations or transformers. That is what an acupuncture point is. Little substations or transformers along the way to keep this power or this bioelectricity or chi, if you will, even so it can get from one place to the other and nourish the tips of the fingers, the toes, the nose, and the brain. Okay, we got that so far, right?
Yes.
Now, if you didn't pay your power bill or your cable bill for a month or two, what would happen to it?
Shuts off.
It would shut off. Do they have to go to your house to shut it down?
No.
They don't, do they? How do they shut them down?
They switch it off.
Right, they're switching stations. They just switch it off. Now, the power of an acupuncturist or his mastery over his skill is knowing where these switching stations are when they're doing acupuncture. For instance, if you had a headache right here above your eye, I'd find a point between your second and third toe that's sore to the touch. And if it's sore to the touch, means energy stuck there. And I'd put a needle in it and just like that, I mean, faster than I can do this, that headache is gone if it's right here. And if it's on the side of your head here, I'd find a place between the fourth and the fifth toe, another sore spot. That means, John, that what I'm going to be doing today is pressing all over your meridian system today. I'm not ever going to stick a needle, or I shouldn't say never, but seldom put a needle where it doesn't hurt. So wherever there's a sore spot that I find on you, and that's why we need communication back and forth, real clear. Wherever there's a sore spot, that's where energy's stuck. And wherever energy's stuck, there's pain. So my job is to free that. And after the treatment today, I'll go back and push on those same spots, and you're going to find many of them are no longer sore. That's why you have chronic pain right now. Now, if I get 50% or better, and I plan to get 100% pain relief on you today, but let's say I get 100% pain relief, that pain will return. Bank on it. All that's telling me is that I'm going to get good results with you, and you're probably you have a 90% chance of that pain never returning after 9 to 15 treatments. That's what it tells me. Some people take a little longer, and unfortunately lately many have taken quite shorter. But the normal is 9 to 15 treatments. So the pain will return, and you can put that on your forehead. The pain will return, so when it does return, don't give up on it, because acupuncture does work. Now what should happen, or what can happen, let's say after the treatment today, the pain returns. It can either be less than it was when you first got here, it can be the same, or it can be real big. And if it gets real big, I mean, it has gotten so big people want to call 911. And they'll call me at home, hey, I've got to go to the doctor. That's called a healing crisis. Tomorrow the pain will be gone, and most likely it won't come back. That's good for you and bad for me. So that's not necessarily a bad thing when you have a lot of pain. The problem is, don't tell your friends that it only took 1 or 2 treatments, okay? Because then they'll come in here and expect that, and that's not the norm. 9 to 15 treatments is the norm. Do you have any questions?
No, I think you covered it pretty good.
All right, let's get started.
Okay, thank you.